Going bankrupt. Is Italy bankrupt? I think essentially all European nations and basically Western nations are essentially bankrupt on a long enough horizon. With Italy, it's difficult to say how long it will take there to be a huge problem in Italy. Obviously, Italy is one of the big countries: Portugal, Italy, Greece and Spain. Greece obviously had huge problems already, and Portugal is a problem, but it's like Greece, it's not a particularly big economy. It's like a $200 billion economy, whereas the likes of Spain, the likes of Italy are well over $1 trillion GDP. That's big sums of money. That's sums of money that the EU is too big to fail, too big to bail. So where does the EU go with that? I think no country, no company should ever be bailed out. It just encourages malinvestment, encourages just dodgy practices. It's not something that should be done at all. It's bad capitalism. It just kicks the can down the road for future problems. With the Italy problem, how long has Italy got left? I mean, the EU is really going to try and prop Italy up as much as it can in terms of, by propping it up, I mean, just encouraging banks and just keep the confidence going. Debt markets only work off confidence. Once the confidence evaporates, the whole system comes crashing down. It's the same as like why currencies fail and hyperinflation. And the EU really have a vested interest in keeping Spain and keeping Italy propped up because they're both Eurozone members. They both use the Eurozone currency. See, with Brexit, the EU kind of just views the English as like naive and foolish for wanting to leave the EU. Like, we never joined the euro currency. But with Italy and Spain, they're well in there. They're deep. They have a lot of skin in the game, and it'd be highly embarrassing if Italy or even Spain chose to leave in the future time and go back to their original currencies, going back to the lira. So it's just a difficult one. I think long term, these countries are sinking ships. Like, we're much better out of the EU, where we can be nimble, where we can be fast, we can be flexible, we can have new innovative ideas to sort of guide our way through a country going bankrupt. I think long term, this is something people aren't really talking about at the moment, but my prediction long term is the EU, they talked about this in 2011, nothing ever came of it because the crisis wasn't large enough to warrant doing this. There just wasn't the will, especially in Germany, to do this. But I think long term, the EU will look at issuing Eurobonds. So it's confusing terms. Eurobonds already exist in the private sector, but it's different to what the EU actually mean of it. By Eurobonds, I mean government bonds that are issued by the EU for every EU, or it'll start off as every Eurozone member state. That way, the countries aren't really trusted by banks like Spain, like Greece, like Italy. Will be able to finance their debt at a lower rate. It will probably be at a detriment to countries like Germany and France. They'll end up paying higher debt, but it'll be sold to the public as they'll get lower debt as well, which will just be a complete lie. So that's my prediction. They'll just lie on Germany. They use the idea of liquidity. They say a euro bond will have more liquidity, but liquidity doesn't beat fundamentals. If you're being sold a pup, people want highest interest rates to being sold a pup. So they'll use the excuse of liquidity to sort of Germany will also be able to finance its debt for less, but that'll just be an out-and-out lie. That'll be the lie that they use. It's the lie they've used previously with the Eurobond idea. So it's definitely interesting times. The Eurozone is like being on a sinking ship. You know that famous bit in the Titanic film where the Titanic's gone vertical and it's sinking. It's like being on that deck of that vertical ship as it's about to plummet to the bottom of the North Atlantic, and saying, well, everything's fine because we haven't sunk yet. You know, everything's not fine. You're about to hit some icy cold water, and you know it's going to be bad times ahead. So it's just interesting. It's like, from a political point of view, it's just really interesting to see what they're going to do. EU are definitely going to try and plug this, and they never come up with long-term solutions. I don't agree with what Italy's doing. Italy are like trying to run quite large budget deficits, larger than what the EU allow. That's what's causing these problems, and that's shaking confidence from banks. Another problem with Italy is a lot of its Italian government debt is actually held by Italian banks. Like, over the last few years, European banks have scaled out. So there's not that much exposure. There is some exposure will be problematic for for German, British, French banks, but nowhere near as much as Italian banks. It's kind of a perfect storm. If the government default, it's going to cause huge problems for the government. Essentially, won't be able to raise taxes. It'll be like an IMF or an EU bailout. That'll be the only way they would sort of keep the government going essentially. But you're going to have a huge problem in the real economy because the banks that are all highly exposed to Italian debt are going to have huge problems as well. So private business won't be getting loans. The banking system itself will probably just come crashing down. So it's huge interesting times. I think for those of us that voted for Brexit, we should, it's not nice to kind of point and say, I told you so, but you know, the EU are really trying to stab the UK in the back. So this is a time for people in Britain to maybe pull up some popcorn, watch from the sidelines, and maybe just take a little bit of joy in seeing these huge problems unfold in the EU, because this is what the Remainers want us tied into. They want us tied into this sinking ship. They want us to be tied to the deck of the Titanic as it plummets to the bottom of the North Atlantic. So just take some satisfaction that, you know, Brexit is the right decision. We're getting out at a good time, because there's a lot of bad times ahead, especially for the Eurozone and for the wider EU. You know, if the Eurozone crashes, you know, the euro currency was never predicted to last a long period of time. Anybody that understands economics, Austrian economics, people that just understand how the system works, like a monetary union is an incredible difficult thing to get to work. Historically, like America's like one of the only few times like a large monetary union has been tried, and even then they had their problems, and it didn't work the first time. So there's nothing to say that this Eurozone project should work the first time, or it should work well, or it won't just all unravel and come falling apart. So that's Jason from Liberty Militia. If you live in Europe, just, you know, buy gold. If you live anywhere in the world, just buy gold and just try and hedge yourself against these future problems. That would be my one tip. Or silver. Silver's good for smaller transactions, because like you're looking at a possible huge economic collapse. You know, I saw this is a jokey sort of video, like pointing a finger, laughing at the EU, but this is a serious problem. You know, it's quite likely over the next few years there's definitely going to be countries in the EU where it's going to be problematic buying things. You're going to have huge currency problems in the future. So small amounts of silver for small transactions like buying food, and then some quantities of gold just to hedge yourself from possible, you know, economic financial collapse. As Jason from Liberty Militia sign off, and I'll see you in the next video.